welcome to another episode of the Candice and Elisa show. We missed you last week, so welcome back. So this week, we're actually touching on something a little saucy, and it is OnlyFans. And I'm not sure if you know about this, Elisa, but OnlyFans has been described by the New York Times as the application that is changing the sex work industry forever. And then some people have even called it the porn page that has the world hooked. And so I wanted to speak about this because I think in so many facets of the world, you know, with COVID being an epidemic now and just the end not being really in sight, and more people turning to sites such as OnlyFans, you know, to supplement their income. I want to know what's your opinion on this, on the page that is changing the porn industry for good.
Well, I mean, like when we discussed the WAP video a few episodes back, there are many ways that we can explore this, but I definitely think that the number one priority for any of these sites is not just consent, but awareness of the implications this has. We're seeing a lot of the younger people, influencers, taking these platforms as, you know, places where some people are making over $100,000 a year. By putting content online, getting all these followers, and it's just the knowledge that this is information that's now stored in the internet forever. People can screen grab, and I think for me it's just really important that there's clarity, that people that are going into this are just really aware of what it means for them and that they're completely happy to do it. If somebody wants to do it fully, you know, in agreement with all of these things, I think it's absolutely their choice, and I have nothing against it. I just fear that the younger people might not be fully aware of the repercussions, but I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I've always had tremendous respect for women in the sex work industry, especially those who choose to be there consensually. I'm not speaking about women who are forced into it.
Yes.
But I mean, a woman who chooses that this is the industry I want to be in, this is the industry that makes me happy, then I'm like, you know what, you do you, boo. I'm 100% for it. For me, though, the only thing like I think that is a little tricky within this atmosphere is probably one, people are more desperate than we've been in a very long time. A lot of people have been laid off their jobs. You're looking at influencers making this much money, and you're looking at everything in society almost beginning to change. And so I completely echo everything you're saying. I just want to throw it out there and ask you, do you think that the way we're viewing sexuality is changing? I mean, from the time of Paris Hilton, you know, where it was like Paris Hilton dropped a sex tape and the whole world loses its mind, to now, I don't believe, or at least I don't see it in my circle or in my network, or maybe it's because I'm much more open-minded and very accepting, I don't know, but I don't see sex tapes and sexuality being as villainized as it used to be, especially exhibition, you know, like showing it or a tape being leaked or a picture being leaked. I don't know. Are we changing, Elisa? Do you think the world may not care after a while?
I mean, I tell you what, I certainly don't care. It's just one of those things that's like, okay, one more sex tape, who cares, you know? But certainly, at least here in the UK, I think the moment that we had Prince Harry have leaked tapes, or Kate Middleton that had topless photos that were put on the cover of a newspaper here, you know, you have to just get over it, man. You know, it's just like, but I mean, I certainly think with sites such as this one, the whole concept of porn, you know, one's shot in a really seedy studio downstairs for like secret code, this kind of stuff. It's just open. You know, you can just have your laptop or your phone in a room and just go for it. So it's definitely changing the amount of people that can participate, the age groups that can participate. And I think it's certainly just making it much more accessible. Right? I mean, as long as you sign up, you have access to it as a contributor and as a viewer. The internet had already opened it up, but I think definitely in this sense, it's just making it so much more accessible in a platform that anyone can sign up to, like Facebook, basically. You know?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think for me, though, if I'm looking at it just from a holistic perspective, I think, you know, this is an industry that is in many regards being very unregulated. It's been, we know that there is, you know, misuse of content. We know that a lot of workers in this industry don't get their fair share or royalties on the clips and films that they do. And we know the redistribution of it, like they just don't profit as much as one would assume they do. And so for me, I think the only thing that I look at when I'm looking at OnlyFans, and I'm looking at people in this industry already, not those who are trying to go in, which is another can of worms, but I think them being able to take back their power and own the work that they do, and being able to charge on that work and being able to monetize it in a fair way, I think is very important. I think that already in and of itself, I don't think as society we can hide our heads and be like, oh, I'm so morally righteous, and therefore if I don't engage in these conversations or these topics, they don't affect me. I think to myself, I'm like, if anything, prostitution happens, sex work happens. So what we need to do is make sure that it happens in the safest context possible for the people engaged in the work, right? Yes. Because not everyone's going to be enticed by this industry, no matter how much you talk about it, no matter how much, like for me personally, it just isn't for me. But then again, I'm a girl who's very self-critical. I'll just be like, look at my thigh, look at this, look at that. No, I'm kidding, but it just doesn't resonate with me on that level that I want to engage in it. So I think there are many women who wouldn't do it because it's just not a part of their DNA, or they just don't feel that comfortable, they don't want to do it. But I do think that the women that do it, with consciousness, I think, I think there needs to be a barrier of entry. I do think that women, the reason I'm saying women in particular and not so much men is because men's reputations don't get as damaged as ours do. A man's area will leak and people will be like, oh, criticize, maybe laugh, or be like, oh, wow, ooh. And a woman, something leaks, God forbid, boob pops out. And then all of a sudden it's like a world travesty. She could run for president. It could have popped out in 1980. She's now in her 60s. And people are like, look, once upon a time she had a life, God forbid. So our reputations get damaged a little more. So I think for me, the one thing I would want to do, and as we redirect society, is probably start regulating what age you can enter this industry. I don't think anyone should just be able to. I don't think you should be able to enter it at 18. I don't think you should be able to enter it at 19, 20, 21. I think there needs to be a very clear barrier of entry that says, nope, we don't accept women under this age. And I think because for me, then it shows that it's a very conscious decision. It shows that it's a decision that's made not so much out of desperation of like, how am I going to pay my student loans? How am I going to, feed my family, it comes from a more solid place that's like, you know what? I've worked, I've done these things, I've lived my life, and it's a decision I'm very comfortable with living with the consequences of. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, one of the points that you touched upon is that now with the pandemic, I mean, so many people have lost jobs. There are people that are still trying to pay for student fees and all these kinds of things. And it's like, how much of the choice at the moment for joining this platform is coming from someone that goes, actually, I'd really like to give sex working a go and see if even if it's out of curiosity, to see if it works for them, versus I'm desperate and I don't know how to pay my bills. I don't know how to cover my tuition. What can I do? I'm already maybe working a job that's ended. I've tried whatever. And then suddenly this door opens. And then I think when you're joining it from that, as you were saying, it is a form of desperation. It's like, what else can I do, right? Then I think that it's just much more challenging. Because on one level, you don't want to say, well, at least there's an option there, right? But at the same time, it just doesn't feel like the right one to end it in that way. And that's the part that I hate,
Another thing I'd add to that probably is the popularization. I'm not a fan of it being looked at without the consequences attached. I recently spoke to someone in the industry. And for me, like I said, I completely respect women in this industry. But I think for me, what stood out about her, she's a very conscious woman. She's someone who is very aware of the consequences and the reputation and everything that comes along with this work. So she's entered it very knowingly. She knows what she's doing. She knows she's willing to live with those consequences, and she's willing to continue living her life and, doing what she does. Whereas many women, I don't think, or at least young women, I'd say, aren't really looking at the bigger picture. They're not really looking at, okay, when I want to step out of this, how do I do it in a way that I still want to accomplish all my other dreams and ambitions, and I wanted to be a doctor, whatever, but should I want to be a school teacher, is how am I going to get employed? Because although it's not fair, women have been fired for far less, right? Like I remember there was some ridiculous headline about how this female teacher, and it was just showing like misogyny in action, how a female teacher and a male teacher were treated completely differently for a similar past, which is both of them did modeling. And so her suggestive lingerie pictures were leaked and his boxer pictures were leaked. He was like, oh, the stud, the hottest teacher around. Oh man, wow. And she got fired. She got fired. And so for me, there is this constant double standard in society whereby I don't think you can overlook, you know, as much as we want to change it, as much as we're protesting, as much as we're doing all these things, it is very important for you as a woman to be very protected, I'd say. You need to protect yourself, not just from the dangers that lurk online, but from those people who cannot differentiate between your online persona and your real life persona, because that's the other danger with women, right? There's very physical, real threat. Whereas a man can look at you, and not all men, some men can look at you online, see your work, see you, you know, doing what you're doing, and then see you on the street and not be able to respect your boundaries. They're like, oh, but you do this as a living, therefore, I assume you just game for everything. And so for me, it just comes back to the place of saying, I really think it needs to be an industry that we acknowledge as humanity's there. With being, you know, prostitution, all of these industries have been here since man has been on the planet. Okay, so we need to accept this. But now it's like saying, let's remove the taboo. Like, we don't have time for taboo. Nothing happens in shame. Nothing happens in secret. Nothing happens in guilt and all those emotions. Let's bring this to the forefront of our conversations, because then when kids don't feel like, oh, I'm going to have to sneak around and do this, and there's no barriers of entry, they're trusting some random dude who's going to lie to them in some seedy motel and be like, oh, no one's going to see this, but you're going to make $2,000. And she's not thinking about, oh, I can tell my parents, I can tell my society, I can be open and be like, guys, is this the going rate? Does this make sense? How am I supposed to do this? How do I protect myself? What is the legal repercussion? What is the fine? Everything. And so you look at all these things and you're like, we as society need to stop looking at things and putting them on the outskirts because we don't want to speak about them. They're too shameful. They're too this. And start saying it's happening. So since it's happening, how do we police it better? How do we allow them to have a union? Because guess what? It was so funny. I was listening to an interview by Mia Khalifa, who is actually, I think, still the biggest porn star in the world, even though she left it years ago. And she said to her, the biggest irony is the very men who have threatened to stone her and kill her, and, you know, she's been banned from Lebanon and different countries, she's like, are the biggest consumers of her material. So, like, you know, it shows you that we're living in a very strange society. And for me, with OnlyFans, I think it's not so much to critique it and be like, oh, it's a terrible platform and whatever. I'm like, okay, fine, you're there. But now, since you are there, since you are mainstream, now let's do the legal work that comes with being mainstream, right? One thing
of the people that are actually participating, to make sure that, as you said, there's got to be better policing. Not that it has to be the police. It just simply has to be an entry kind of gatekeepers, I think, just to make sure that people are coming in for the right reasons, going to be protected, they're aware of the consequence, they know what they're getting into, and it's not just one of these, oh my God, I need to pay my tuition, what am I doing? Oh, let me just do this, right? With no thought process. I mean, this happened to me when I was trying to pay my tuition in school. I remember thinking, you know, oh my God, I'm working and, you know, I've got a scholarship, but I need to pay this, that, and that. How am I going to cover all my costs? Then I started, you know, you're thinking outside the box. I knew people that did work as escorts. It wasn't for me. And then I even looked at the possibility of selling your eggs, because as a woman, they give you much more money than men going to do the deeds. So basically, and, you know, I think at the time I wasn't thinking of the consequence of, you know, oh, if I sold my eggs, you know, that means that I could basically, you know, have mothered a child indirectly somehow, or a few. I'm not thinking that in that moment, right? You think of it, but it's kind of like, oh yeah, well, but I'll pay my tuition, right? So I just feel like it's got to be a bit more awareness. And I don't know, you know, it's a combination of education, but it's a combination of openness as well. As you said, it's something that's there. It's something that people need to be able to speak about, get advice from parents as well. You know, it's like, we can't be completely like, no, it's, as you said, it's happening. The more we try to suppress it, the more it becomes this unmonitored place where there is room for a lot of abuse and broken boundaries, because we just don't want to look at it, and therefore we can't actually properly regulate it. So
That's it, regulate. And, you know, it's so ironic that we look at this industry and it's like, so, oh, how do you end up in these situations? How do women, you know, end up having a porn tape or having news leaked or whatever the case is? And I've got a couple of stories around this. One, I used to be a young model, and I remember there were some photographers that just gave me the ick, but I'm very fortunate. I always look at myself as being fortunate that I was a much more aware person than, you know, most kids my age. And obviously circumstances made that happen. But I mean, I used to think to myself, you know, it's so important that we look at these things and say, it's not, don't blame the victim of why the pictures are out. Don't blame the girl about like how she ended up here, because everyone tells you these dreams. No one is like, hey, do you want to be a porn star? No. People are usually saying, you want to be an upscale model or an elegant model, whatever, the glamour model, whatever. And then there was another incident where I was on a plane. I was actually flying to Cape Town to do a talk. And I don't know, the people sitting next to me thought clearly I was younger than I was. And she started a conversation with me and she's like, oh, you've got such a great frame. And I'm like, thank you. You know, it was a very awkward conversation because we were stuck together for 45 minutes. And then eventually she said to me, oh, I manage workers, dancers, and you could make this amount of money if you joined my team, because this, all you have to do is strip a little, dance a little. You know, my worst girls make 45,000 Rand. And you're like, okay, I just got recruited to be, you know, an exotic dance. And it happens.
I got recruited to shoot one because when I was in film school, but it was pitched, I think it was pitched like an erotica art film or something like this. And I was like, oh great, you know, what's the kind of story, you know? Well, there's these two girls and, you know, they have sex and this kind of thing. And I'm like, okay. And the story is, you know, and they're like, oh yeah, no, but I'm like, so how is this different to porn? Like, it's an erotic art film, so how? And I was just getting caught in this loop, and like, I mean, the money was incredible, and I was like, but I'm pretty sure this is porn. You're asking me to shoot a porn film, and I couldn't. So I didn't do it because again, it wasn't something I wanted to get involved in at that point, but. I just thought it's so funny because it's always pitched, like you said, it's not pitched exactly like what it is. And you have to really do a bit of digging. And if you're just of a curious nature, you might just end up showing up and then being like, huh, not what I thought.
That's it. And I think that's the thing with women. We do have a much more curious nature. And I think we are a little bit more malleable to not insult someone or not to, I don't want to make you feel like a creep. So, oh my gosh, I'm going to show you my boobs, even though this is not what I signed up for. And oh my God, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. So if you're asking me and you're saying, I must trust you, sir, of course I'm going to try and trust you. So there's a lot of things. And I think for me as a young woman, I mean, I think I've been very blessed to be very mature. But even I was making bad decisions before 25, where I was like, I thought I was so in tune. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, so much could have happened just from a small, slight change, you know? But yeah, I think this is a conversation we could speak about at length.
As always.
But I think what we've come down to is let's regulate it and let's make sure that these are a protected industry and that they're proper measures of entry before doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that it's something that we can continue to talk about freely, respectfully, with respect for the sex workers as well, because I think too often they're denigrated in a way that's not acceptable. So we need to also really be conscientious about that. And guys, drop us a line, drop us some comments, and we really look forward to hanging out with you again next week.